I don't have a backyard, I don't have a greenhouse, but I do have a deck, some containers, and last year I managed to grow actual food with this setup. This year I'm hoping to grow enough to cut down on groceries. Now, I'm not a gardening channel, I'm just a girl in her 20s learning basic life skills, but if you've ever wanted to start a garden but feel overwhelmed or think you don't have the space, here's my plan for year 2, including my go-to varieties, favorite products, and the mistakes I'm not repeating. Don't let the sunshine fool you. It's literally 30 degrees out right now. So last year was my first year ever gardening, and I ended up growing 11 pounds of food on my deck. No big deal. My goal going into last year was simply to learn how to garden and not kill too many plants. So let's talk about my goals for this year in the garden. And if you watched my goal setting video this year, then you'd already know these. 1, actually start making a difference in our grocery shopping. So I want to see us buying less produce and learning how to preserve my food. I think that's a great goal. Number 2, this is actually my first time ever starting seeds indoors. So I'm going to do that later in this video. And then finally, I'm also continuing to experiment with varieties of plants so I can find my go-tos that I'm going to grow year after year. So let's talk about how I actually garden on my deck. So I am a complete container gardener. So I don't grow anything in the ground, obviously. So I have 3 main containers. 1, I have a container that goes over my deck railing. I actually want to get a few more of these. These are really great for like flowers and decorative plants. I also have a 10-gallon round pot that currently holds a dead blueberry plant. Enough said there. And then finally, the absolute star of my garden is my green stalk. It's an amazing vertical planter. And no, this is not sponsored in any way. I would absolutely freak out if Green Stalk would sponsor me. That would be amazing. It's basically a vertical planter with 5 different tiers, and it allows me to grow 30 plus different plants all within 2 square feet on my deck. And so without the green stalk, there's no way I'd be able to provide any significant amount of food for my family on the deck alone. I loved it so much last year that I did buy a second one for this year. And honestly, let's all just pretend that this is where the obsession stops. I mean, that's what I told my husband. 2 and I'm done. Okay, so let's talk about my plan and what plants I'm actually planting for 2025. So my main crops for this year are tomatoes, strawberries, and herbs. I'll be growing more plants than that, but those are going to be my main cash crops, I guess. I found that my seed collection has grown quite a bit since last year. Just listen to that ASMR. I'm going to split these into cool weather and then warm weather crops. For the cool weather crops, I'm actually going to be growing them twice this year, for the spring and then for the winter. So for my cool weather crops, what I'm going to be growing this year is spinach. I like to eat a lot of spinach. I got the Viroflay variety of spinach because I did research and it said that it was a little bit slower to bolt, so it's a little bit more heat tolerant, which I'm really hoping it's true. I'm also going to be planting for the first time this year cilantro because we use it so much in any Mexican food that we make. We're trying out the slow bolt variety, so I'm hoping this will just be a little bit easier to grow. I'm also growing carrots. So I actually have 2 varieties of carrots. The Scarlet Nantes. I have no clue how to pronounce that. And then the Coral. That was a free seed gift from Baker Creek when I ordered my seeds. And then the Scarlet Nantes. It was a free gift from Greenstock when I ordered my planter. I grew these last year and they were pretty good. I just planted way too few of them. So I'm going to try to really plant a lot of them this year. Last but certainly not least, I am going to be growing a whole bunch of beets. I didn't realize how delicious fresh homegrown beets are. Oh my gosh, girl. If I could fill all of my planters with just beets, honestly, I wouldn't even be that mad. This is what we grew last year, the Detroit Dark Red, and they were so juicy, so easy to grow. My only con was that I literally planted, I think, 3 last year. So I don't know what I was thinking. And then moving on to the warm weather crops. So this is where the garden really starts to shine. As I said, one of my goals this year is to grow more herbs. So I have 3 different herbs. Basically what I did was I just Googled like what are the most commonly used herbs. And I also just looked at our spice cabinet and was like, what are we constantly using? So between the 2 of those, this is what I decided on. French thyme, which I don't think I've ever used thyme. I know it's in a lot of recipes, but I typically just skip it because I'm like, I don't feel like buying thyme for that. So I figured, why not grow some of it? Oregano, because in pretty much every Italian recipe, I'm always using like tablespoons of oregano. And then finally, rosemary. And I'm gonna learn how to preserve them so I can like make my own spices and have like kind of fresh herbs all year round. And then moving on to my tomatoes. So this year I am trying 3 new varieties. So as a heads up, I can only grow container friendly varieties. So these are smaller than like your normal tomato that grows like 8 feet tall. I can't do that in a green stock. So last year I grew a variety called Home Slice and it was so delicious to eat. But one of my ultimate goals is to create our own homemade tomato sauce, you know, freeze it and have fresh tomato sauce year round. Home Slice, which it was delicious, it's a slicing variety, so it has a lot more liquid, like a lot more seeds and water because it's meant to slice and put on sandwiches. So this year I'm trying out 3 more varieties that I think are going to be more paste tomatoes. So this is from Michigan Gardener, the Napoli tomato. I'm also trying out Bush Roma Italian Roma, which these look really great. It says it's a superb Italian paste and canning tomato. So super excited for that. And then finally, from Michigan Gardener again, I am trying their Manitoba tomato. I am growing 2 varieties of bush beans. Last year, I grew these Royal Burgundy beans. So they're basically just green beans, but purple. So I thought that was really fun and super functional because they stand out from the leaves. When you cook them, they do turn green. So they don't stay purple, which is kind of sad. So those were really good and they tasted really good. And then I'm also growing the Blue Lake Bush variety of beans. So I think this is probably the most well-known variety of green beans. So I figured I'd hop on the train and see what all the hype's about. And then finally, I'm also growing some flowers because I love to have fresh flowers in the house. They're just so expensive. A bouquet at Sam's Club is like $15. I bought all of these seed packets for less than $15 and these can grow so many flowers and I actually grew them last year as well. So they last multiple seasons. The first flower I'm growing is a marigold. They're the Chica Flame variety. So they are a smaller variety, which is what I needed to grow in my green stock. They grew super well, super easily. I'm growing Cosmos this year. The variety is Xanthos. Again, they're dwarf variety, but pretty yellow flowers. Gomphrena again. QIS Fiery Sunrise Blend. So I did not do these justice last year, so I'm gonna grow a lot more of them. And then finally, I have some zinnias. These are the Thumbelina variety. So this is like a miniature zinnia, which is perfect because zinnias can get really, really big if you didn't know. So those are all of the plants I'll be planting this year. Now let's talk about the different products that I use for my garden. Since I grow in containers, I obviously have to like purchase soil to grow in. So I've been using Fox Farm Happy Frog soil and I've been really, really impressed by it. And then for amendments or like add-ins to my soil, I use a couple of different granular fertilizers. So those are kind of more slow release fertilizers. I use Espoma Garden Tone and then Berry Tone. So plants like berries really like the Berry Tone. All of my other plants essentially get the Garden Tone. And then finally, the other thing that I add into my soil is worm castings. So that's basically worm poop, but it's a great source of nutrients. Really any brand will do. I just bought what my local Home Depot had. But with this combination of fertilizers and soil, like my plants, they looked like they were thriving. I'm a little nervous, but it's time to start some seeds. I figured it would be helpful to kind of chat about some of the mistakes that I made last year so that you can avoid making those mistakes. So let's chat about that while I start my seeds for the year. Last year was my first real attempt at gardening and I made a lot of mistakes, so let's talk about them. First, I didn't know what to do with my produce, if I had really small quantities or really large quantities. I'd get like 3 green beans at a time and have no clue how to use them. But then when I had a surplus, I had the same problem. So this year, I actually wrote out a plan for everything I'm growing and how I plan on preserving a surplus so that nothing goes to waste. Second, I grew things that we don't even eat. Lettuce, it's not really in our diet. I tried giving it away, but lesson was learned. Third, I drastically underestimated the number of beets I should grow. I won't make that mistake again. Fourth, and while this actually turned out to not really be a mistake, I'll explain that in a moment, I didn't use my green stock to its full potential. I didn't think about succession planting or planting for the fall. I left pockets open, which means I could have been growing way more. And finally, I didn't have a plan for vacations. My plants got real wilty while I was gone for a weekend in August, so this year I'm getting a Bluetooth timer for my hose. Now, a few things I did right. I, one, started small and didn't utilize my planters to the max, which actually kept it manageable for my first year. Second, I also learned not to skimp on potting soil. Instead, I got the more expensive stuff, but shopped around. So pro tip, hydroponics stores are usually way cheaper than garden centers. I bought my Fox Farm soil for the price of Miracle-Gro, about $12 for a 2 cubic foot bag. And finally, tracking everything in a garden journal is a game changer. I'm using this Notion template for the second year in a row, and I wouldn't be able to garden without it. So here's to year 2 of growing food on my deck, hopefully with fewer mistakes and way more beets. And green stock planters. Sorry, hubby.